The morning sun shines brightly on Willow Creek High School. The sound of chattering students fills the air as they make their way to class. Among the crowd is James, a 14-year-old black student with a quiet demeanor and kind eyes. He carries his books tightly against his chest, walking alone, yet exuding a calm sense of focus. James is the kind of student who always completes his assignments on time, never disrupts class, and greets teachers politely. He is hardworking and dreams of becoming a scientist someday. Despite his efforts to be the best version of himself, his skin color often makes him a target for ridicule. Standing near the school lockers are three boys, Tom, Jake, and Chris. The leader is loud and overconfident, always seeking attention. He thrives on putting others down to boost his ego, his loyal follower, laughs at every joke Tom makes, even when it's not funny. Jake doesn't question Tom's actions and follows him blindly, on the other hand, is quieter. He tags along with the group, but often looks uncomfortable with their actions. Deep down, he doesn't agree with the way Tom treats James, but lacks the courage to speak up. As James walks by, the bullies exchange glances and smirks. Tom steps in James's path, blocking him. "Hey, James, what's the rush? Off to save the world?" Tom sneers, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Jake laughs loudly, encouraging him. Chris stands off to the side, watching uncomfortably, but staying silent. James tries to sidestep them, but Tom grabs the notebook from his hands. "Let's see what the genius is working on." Tom flips through the pages, then tears one out. "Oops. My bad," he says, mockingly, tossing the book back at James. Jake joins in, pushing James lightly as he picks up his notebook. "Don't take it personally, James. We're just having fun." James remains calm, his grip tightening on the notebook. He doesn't say a word, but walks away quickly, his head held high. The bullies laugh behind him, their taunts echoing through the hallway. As James finds a quiet spot to sit during lunch, he opens his notebook and stares at the torn page. He sighs, feeling the weight of isolation. Though he wants to stand up for himself, he knows speaking out could make things worse. He decides to focus on his studies, hoping that someday his hard work will outshine the hate. Meanwhile, Chris glances at James from across the cafeteria. For a brief moment, guilt flickers in his eyes, but he quickly looks away when Tom and Jake call him over. The days following the first encounter with the bullies are tense for James. Each morning, he wakes up with the hope that maybe today will be different, but it rarely is. The constant taunts, jokes, and insults from Tom, Jake, and even the uncomfortable silence from Chris have begun to wear him down. One day in class, James is bent over his desk, completely absorbed in his math homework. The classroom is quiet except for the sound of pencils scratching on paper. Suddenly, he feels a cold breeze as Tom slides into the seat behind him. "Hey, James, you're a real genius, huh? I'm sure you're solving equations like a wizard," Tom mocks, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. James feels his cheeks flush, but he remains silent, refusing to engage. He continues to write, determined not to let Tom's words get to him. Tom leans forward and snatches James's assignment from his desk. He holds it up for the whole class to see. "Look at this. The Pythagorean theorem. Is this even real math, or is it just something James made up?" Tom laughs, his voice full of ridicule. The class starts snickering. Jake and Chris join in the laughter, while Chris, still uncomfortable, avoids eye contact with James. Tom suddenly rips the assignment in half, throwing the torn pieces at James. "Oops, my bad. Can't even read your handwriting anyway," he says mockingly. The teacher, Mrs. Davis, looks up from her desk, but she does nothing to intervene. She shakes her head, assuming it's just harmless teasing. James tries to hold back tears as he gathers the torn pieces of his work. His classmates glance at him, but no one speaks up in his defense. The next day at lunch, James sits alone at his usual table, pulling out his lunch. He unwraps his sandwich, taking a deep breath to calm his nerves. He knows the bullies will be nearby, but he tries to focus on the peaceful moments before they come, but it doesn't last long. Tom, Jake, and Chris walk over to his table. Tom grins widely. "Hey, James, is that your lunch?" Tom says, feigning surprise. "Wow, looks so fancy." He then kicks James's lunchbox, sending it crashing to the floor. James watches helplessly as his food spills all over the ground. Tom steps back and laughs. "Guess you can't eat today? Maybe next time don't bring something so disgusting." Jake chuckles and nudges Chris, while Chris, this time, hesitates for a moment, his eyes filled with a flicker of guilt. But he doesn't say anything. James quietly picks up the pieces of his lunch, his face flushed with embarrassment. He doesn't retaliate. Instead, he silently walks away, trying to ignore the feeling of humiliation building up inside him. The final straw comes a few days later. James has been working tirelessly on a science project for weeks. It's his most important assignment of the year, and it's worth a significant portion of his grade. He's carefully assembled a model of the solar system, complete with planets made of clay and meticulously painted. The project represents his passion for science and his dreams of becoming a scientist. On the day of the presentation, James walks into class early to set up his project. As he arranges his model on the desk, he feels a sense of pride. This is the one thing he's worked on that no one can take away from him. But when the bell rings and students start entering the classroom, he hears footsteps approaching. It's Tom, Jake, and Chris. They see James's project, and Smirk Tom eyes the model and laughs. "You really think this is impressive? You spent all this time on this junk?" Before James can respond, Tom shoves the model off the desk, sending it crashing to the ground. Clay planets roll across the floor, and paint splatters everywhere. James stands frozen in shock, his mouth open, unable to process what just happened. The class erupts into laughter, but it's the type of laughter that cuts deeper than any words. Chris finally speaks, though his voice is barely above a whisper. "Tom, that's messed up," he says, looking away. But Tom just shrugs and walks out of the room with Jake, leaving James alone with the ruins of his project. James stares at the broken pieces of his project on the floor, feeling a wave of frustration and helplessness. He has put in so much effort, and now it's all ruined. The tears sting his eyes, but he quickly blinks them away. He doesn't want anyone to see him cry. He quietly gathers the pieces, his hands shaking. The thought of telling his parents or teachers crosses his mind, but he knows it won't make a difference. They'll just say he needs to be stronger, that it's part of life. The truth is, James is tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being different, and tired of feeling like he doesn't belong. But even as he feels broken on the inside, he refuses to give up. His moral compass, his belief in doing the right thing, keeps him going. He doesn't want to stoop to their level. He won't let their hate change who he is. It's another regular day at Willow Creek High School, and James has just finished his last class of the day. He heads to the library to finish his homework, hoping to find some peace away from the bullies. Little does he know, the events that unfold in the next few minutes will change everything. Meanwhile, Tom, Jake, and Chris have just finished their classes as well. Instead of going straight home, they decide to skip the bus and head to the old storage room at the back of the school. The room is often used to store cleaning supplies, broken furniture, and old equipment. It's an out-of-bounds area for students, but the bullies know the school staff doesn't check it. Often, Tom pushes open the door to the storage room with a loud creak. Inside, the room smells musty, filled with the scent of old wood and cleaning chemicals. A pile of cardboard boxes sits in one corner, while rusted shelves line the walls, filled with buckets, spray cans, and cleaning supplies. "This place is perfect for a little fun," Tom says with a grin, grabbing a matchbox from his bag. "Are you seriously going to light something in here?" Chris asks, nervously glancing around. He's hesitant, but there's something in Tom's voice that makes him feel like he has no choice but to follow along. "Come on, Chris. Don't be such a baby," Jake says, laughing. "What's the worst that can happen?" Tom flicks a match and lights it, the small flame dancing in his fingers. He then takes the match and moves it over to a can of cleaning fluid. The liquid ignites almost instantly, creating a small flame that quickly spreads to a pile of papers. "See? No big deal," Tom smirks, tossing the match into the pile of cardboard. But as the flames grow higher, something goes wrong. A nearby shelf with spray cans begins to heat up. The cans start to hiss, and then, boom! A loud explosion shakes the room, and the flames suddenly explode out of control. The fire spreads quickly, eating through the cardboard and wood. The shelves catch fire, and the room fills with thick, choking smoke. The bullies freeze, their eyes wide with fear, as the fire grows hotter and faster. "Oh no," Jake mutters, his face pale. He turns to Tom. "What do we do now?" Tom's bravado falters for a second, but he quickly tries to act calm. "We have to get out of here. It's just a small fire. No one's going to notice." His voice trails off, and he begins to panic as the smoke thickens. Chris, who has been quiet this entire time, looks around desperately. "We need to get out now, Tom. We're not going to make it if we stay here." The fire roars, sending sparks into the air. The storage room's single exit is now blocked by flames. The bullies try to push through the door, but it's stuck. Jake's voice rises in panic. "The door's jammed. We're trapped." The school alarm starts ringing loudly, signaling that a fire has been detected. James, who is in the library at the time, hears the blaring siren and looks up. His heart begins to race as he realizes the fire is near inside the storage room. The bullies' panic grows. The heat is unbearable, and the thick smoke is making it harder to breathe. Tom starts banging on the door, shouting for help, but it's useless. "They're stuck. I didn't mean for this to happen," Tom stammers, his usual arrogance replaced by fear. Jake coughs, his face turning red from the smoke. "We need to get out of here. I can't breathe." Chris, who's still in shock, starts to hyperventilate. "We're going to die in here." His voice cracks, and he starts crying. The fire is closing in on them, and with every passing second, it becomes clearer. They may not make it out alive. The situation has gone from a harmless prank to a life-threatening disaster. James, who is still in the library, feels a chill run down his spine as the sirens blare. His instincts kick in. The fire is near, and something tells him the bullies are the ones in danger. Without thinking twice, he grabs his bag and rushes toward the exit. He can't sit back and watch anyone, no matter how bad they've treated him, get hurt. As he reaches the hall, he hears muffled screams coming from the storage room. Without hesitation, he sprints toward the source of the noise. He knows the room is locked, but there's no time to waste back in the storage room. The fire has grown rapidly. Tom, Jake, and Chris are huddled together, coughing and panicking. The room is becoming an inferno, and the door remains stuck. "I'm sorry, James," Chris whispers between gasps, his voice filled with regret. He can't believe how badly they've treated him, how they've pushed him to the edge. But now, in the face of real danger, the past feels insignificant. Outside, James finally reaches the door and finds it locked. Without wasting a second, he pulls at the door with all his strength, trying to open it. The flames roar behind him, and he can hear the terrified shouts of the bullies inside. Will James make it in time to save them, or will the fire consume everything in its path? The tension builds as the flames rage on, and James fights to reach them, knowing that every second counts. As the fire rages inside the storage room, James stands outside. His heart pounding in his chest. He knows the bullies are inside, trapped and terrified. For a split second, he hesitates. He's been hurt by them in so many ways, emotionally and mentally, and now they are in danger because of their own reckless actions. But despite all of that, something deep inside James makes him act. He can't stand by and watch anyone, no matter who they are, suffer. His mind flashes back to his moral values, the lessons his parents taught him. Always do what's right, no matter how difficult it is. With a final, resolute breath, James decides to risk it all. He may not be their friend, but no one deserves to die like this. He won't let them burn, not if he can do something about it. James, with all the courage he can muster, takes a deep breath and rushes toward the door. The fire's intensity is unbearable, the heat searing through his clothes as he grips the door handle. It's hot, but with sheer determination, he twists the knob and forces the door open. The smoke pours out like a thick cloud, choking the air and making it nearly impossible to see. Inside, the flames are everywhere, licking at the walls, curling around broken shelves, and spreading quickly across the room. The temperature is unbearable, but James doesn't care. He knows he doesn't have much time. "Tom! Jake! Chris!" he shouts, his voice hoarse from the smoke, but his words are drowned out by the roar of the fire. He steps into the inferno, squinting through the smoke, trying to find the bullies. "James?" A voice calls through the smoke. It's Tom, his voice trembling with fear. He's hunched over in the corner of the room, his clothes singed, his face smeared with soot. His eyes are wide with panic, and the fear in them is a sharp contrast to his usual arrogance. James pushes forward, struggling to see through the haze. "Tom, stay where you are. I'm coming to get you." Tom stares at him, stunned, his face a mix of disbelief and confusion. He doesn't know how to react. He's always been the one who bullied James, made fun of him, and now here James is, putting his life on the line to save him, but there's no time to dwell on it. James grabs Tom by the arm, pulling him to his feet. "Come on, we have to get out of here, now!" But the smoke thickens, and the flames grow louder, as if the fire is fighting back. The room trembles with the force of the heat. James stumbles, pulling Tom along. "Where's Jake and Chris?" he shouts through the smoke. "Over here!" Jake's voice, full of panic, cuts through the chaos. James turns and sees Jake in the far corner, struggling to stay on his feet as the flames get closer. His eyes are wide with terror, his mouth open in a silent scream as he tries to shield himself from the heat. James pushes past the fire, making his way toward Jake. The air burns his lungs, and every step feels like he's walking through fire itself, but he refuses to stop. When he reaches Jake, the boy is trembling, his face streaked with tears. I'm sorry, James," Jake sobs, clutching James's arm. "I didn't know. I didn't mean for it to get this bad." James doesn't respond, just pulling Jake along with him as quickly as he can. "We're getting out of here. Hold on." As they move, the fire crackles louder, and the ceiling begins to creak ominously. The building is on the brink of collapse. James doesn't know how much longer the room will hold up. He needs to act fast. There's only one person left. "Chris! Chris, where are you?" James calls, coughing from the thick smoke through the haze. James sees a figure standing near the corner, collapsed on the floor. It's Chris, and he's struggling to breathe, his face pale and covered in soot. I can't breathe, James," Chris chokes out, his voice weak. "Help me." James stumbles toward him, feeling the heat rise with each step. His body is starting to burn, his skin tingling with the heat. But he won't stop. "Chris, you have to move," James says, grabbing Chris under the arms and pulling him to his feet. "We're getting out of here now." But Chris is barely able to stand. His legs shake and his breathing is labored. I'm not going to make it," he whispers, his voice filled with regret. James lifts him with all the strength he can muster, his muscles aching, his body on the verge of collapse from the smoke and heat. "You're going to make it," James says firmly. "We're getting out of here together." With all three bullies now in his care, James starts to head for the door. But the fire is growing faster, the room shaking violently as the ceiling begins to collapse. Pieces of wood and metal start falling around them, some narrowly missing them. James struggles, his breath shallow, his vision blurry from the smoke. He can barely see, but he knows he has to get out. Every step feels heavier than the last. His body is screaming for him to stop, but he pushes forward, driven by the instinct to save them. "Come on," James grunts, dragging Tom, Jake, and Chris behind him. They're close to the door now, but the fire is closing in fast. The heat is unbearable, and the smoke fills their lungs, making every breath a fight. As James pushes through the door, he feels something sharp scrape against his side. He winces in pain, but there's no time to stop. He pulls the bullies with him, each step feeling like an eternity. Finally, they make it outside. The fresh air hits their lungs, and James collapses to the ground, gasping for breath. His body is covered in burns and cuts, and he feels dizzy, but he knows they're safe. The emergency services arrive just as the school building begins to burn completely. Fire trucks, ambulances, and police swarm the area. They quickly start to douse the flames and help the students who were inside. James lies on the ground, his body bruised and burned, but alive. As paramedics approach him, he looks at Tom, Jake, and Chris, who are sitting nearby, stunned and silent. They stare at James with a mixture of awe and shame. Tom, still in shock, is the first to speak. "James, don't know how to thank you. We didn't deserve your help." James, despite his exhaustion, gives a weak smile. "You didn't have to. It's just who I am." The moments after the fire are filled with chaos, but as the fire trucks arrive and the building is slowly being extinguished, a heavy silence settles over the scene. James is lying on the grass, exhausted, burned, and bruised, but alive. The paramedics are checking his vitals, and the bullies, Tom, Jake, and Chris, are sitting off to the side, still in shock. Their faces are pale, and they can't stop staring at James, who risked everything to save them. The once untouchable group of bullies now sits in quiet reflection. They had caused so much pain to James, mocking him, making him feel like an outsider, and now they owe him their lives. Tom, still looking dazed and shaken from the fire, stands up first. His legs are unsteady, but he approaches James. I don't know where to start," Tom says, his voice shaking. His usual cocky attitude is gone, replaced with deep regret. "James, I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I never realized how much I hurt you, how wrong I was." James, despite his injuries, looks up at Tom, his eyes calm. Tom continues, "You saved us. After everything I did to you. I didn't deserve it, but I'm sorry, really." Jake and Chris look at each other, hesitant at first, but as they see Tom's genuine remorse, they slowly stand up and walk toward James. "We're sorry, too," Jake says softly, his voice almost a whisper. "We were wrong, James. I don't know what I was thinking. I treated you like crap for no reason, and you still saved us." Chris nods, his face full of regret. "We were just following Tom. I never thought it would get this bad. I'm sorry, I really am." James, despite the weight of everything he's been through, feels a flicker of something. Forgiveness. He looks up at the bullies, his eyes meeting theirs, and speaks calmly. James slowly gets to his feet with the help of a paramedic, his body aching from the pain, but he stands tall, his gaze steady. The bullies are watching him closely, all three of them visibly shaken. They expected anger, or maybe even rejection, but what they see is different. "I forgive you," James says quietly, his voice firm, "but that doesn't mean what you did is okay." He pauses, letting the words sink in. "You've made people feel worthless, scared, and alone. I don't know how many times you've made people cry, or how many people you've hurt with your words and actions. But I'm telling you this, you can't keep acting like that. You have to learn how to treat people with respect." Tom, Jake, and Chris hang their heads, ashamed. They've been forced to face their own behavior in a way they never expected. James's words cut deeper than any punishment they could have faced. "I didn't save you because I wanted you to say sorry," James continues, his voice growing stronger. "I saved you because no one deserves to die like that, not even you. But I want you to understand that actions have consequences, and I hope someday you'll change, for your own sake." The bullies don't say anything at first, their silence speaking volumes. They are still processing what has happened, the sheer weight of their own guilt pressing down on them. They had been bullies, but now they are the ones who have to face the truth about their actions. Tom looks up at James, his face full of remorse. We will change, I promise." The news of the fire spreads quickly throughout the school. Students, teachers, and staff gather outside, still in shock over what happened. The fire may have been a terrifying disaster, But it also revealed something powerful: the courage of one student who was willing to risk everything to save others. James, despite his injuries, is surrounded by students, teachers, and even the principal, all of them offering their thanks and praise. His classmates, who had once ignored him or even mocked him, are now applauding him for his bravery. "You're a hero, James," one student says, patting him on the back. "Thank you for saving them," another student adds. Smiling, James's face is flushed from the attention, but he nods respectfully, accepting the gratitude. He knows that the praise is not just for his actions, but for the lessons that came with them. The principal, standing nearby, walks up to James. "James," she says, "I'm so proud of you. What you did today, it was extraordinary. Not only did you save lives, but you also showed the school what it means to be truly brave, to show compassion, even when you've been hurt." James looks at the principal, but his thoughts are elsewhere. He remembers the years of torment, the times he felt alone, and the pain of being judged for the color of his skin. But none of that matters now. "I didn't do it for the praise," James says, humbly looking around at his classmates. "I did it because it's the right thing to do." The students and teachers nod in agreement, and the applause continues. But for James, it's not the applause that matters. It's the change in the hearts of the people around him. He sees the bullies now standing at the edge of the crowd, their heads held low, their faces filled with shame, but also understanding. He knows they've learned their lesson, and that in itself is enough. In the days following the fire, the atmosphere at school shifts. The bullies, Tom, Jake, and Chris, are no longer the ones making fun of others. They start to distance themselves from their old ways, and slowly they begin to apologize to those they've hurt. It's not an overnight change, but it's a start. James, too, has changed. He's no longer the quiet, invisible kid in the back of the classroom. He's now someone who has shown true courage, and others look up to him. He doesn't seek the spotlight, but he has become a symbol of bravery, compassion, and forgiveness. The school community has learned a valuable lesson. It's easy to judge someone based on their appearance or background, but it takes true strength to see beyond that, to show empathy, and to help others. Even those who have hurt you, James, may not be the loudest or the most outgoing student in school, but he's the one who has made the biggest impact, and that's a lesson everyone will carry with them for a long time. The sun begins to set as James walks home, his pace slow and reflective. His body aches, his burns sting, but there's a quiet satisfaction in his heart. He walks alongside his parents, who have been by his side throughout the ordeal, their faces filled with pride and relief. "I'm so proud of you, James," his mother says, squeezing his hand gently. "You've shown more courage than anyone could have imagined." James smiles up at her, but it's a humble smile, one that doesn't seek attention or praise. He's learned that doing the right thing doesn't require applause. It requires strength of character. His father places a hand on his shoulder. "You've become a true example to others, son. You didn't just save lives, you changed hearts. That's something not everyone can do." James nods, looking ahead as the sky turns a soft orange. He doesn't need words to describe how he feels. The satisfaction isn't from the recognition or the praise. It's knowing that, even in the face of everything that happened, he stayed true to himself. He didn't let hate or fear change him. As they reach their home, James feels a sense of peace. He may have faced hardships, but today he made a difference. And that's all that matters. Meanwhile, Tom, Jake, and Chris are sitting together in a quiet corner of the schoolyard, far from the crowds that once admired them. Their heads are still low, but their faces are different now. Gone is the arrogance, replaced by a sense of humility and self-awareness. They've spent the past few days reflecting on their actions and what James did for them. "I don't know how to make up for what we've done," Tom says quietly, looking at the ground. "But I want to try." Jake nods, his voice softer than it's ever been. "We were wrong, all of us. We hurt people, we bullied them. And now, after what James did for us, it feels like we're the ones who owe everyone an apology. Chris, who has been silent up until now, finally speaks. We can't change what we did, but we can change how we live from now on. We're not going to be those people anymore. We've learned our lesson. Tom looks at the others, determination in his eyes. We're going to do better. We promise. The three of them sit quietly for a moment, contemplating the promise they've just made, not just to each other, but to themselves. It's the beginning of a new chapter for them, one where they'll choose kindness over cruelty. The story of James and the bullies is not just about bravery or forgiveness. It's about understanding the power of change. It's about seeing beyond the surface, beyond race, beyond differences, and realizing that everyone, no matter where they come from or what they've done, has the potential for growth. James, despite being hurt by the bullies, chose to forgive them when he could have easily let anger control him. He didn't fight fire with fire. He fought it with courage, compassion, and an unwavering belief in what's right. His actions showed that real strength lies not in hatred, but in the ability to rise above it. The bullies, too, learned that their actions had consequences. They learned that their hate didn't make them strong, it made them weak. It was only by letting go of their prejudices and embracing change that they found true power. This story is a message for everyone. Hate, racism, and cruelty will never make anyone stronger. They will only tear us apart. But forgiveness, courage, and understanding, these are the things that truly make us strong. When we choose kindness, we don't just make the world better for others. We make it better for ourselves. 2 James didn't need to be a hero to change the world. He just needed to be himself. And in doing so, he showed all of us that, no matter what challenges we face, we can always choose the path of goodness. Because in the end, that's the only thing that truly matters.